All right, let's get started because I think we're the only session between you and lunch. So this will be a more business-focused session, just around identity orchestration. Orchestration is the hot topic. I believe in the last MQ, it was front and center, saying that most organizations in the next 2 years are going to be using orchestration in one function or form. So to get started, let's introduce ourselves. My name is Zain Malik. I'm a senior product marketing manager here at Ping, and Loren Russon is going to be presenting with me. He's the SVP of product and technology, and he's been leading our go-to-market efforts around our recent orchestration platform, DaVinci.
Cool. And I'll stage left. All right.
So why are organizations looking at orchestration? I think, for a while, identity has been this little corner of cybersecurity, and now it's come to the forefront, especially, since the pandemic, since everyone has accelerated their digital transformation. And so identity is one, about security, but it's also about meeting your regulatory and compliance demands. I was just in a compliance session for a bank earlier today. And then the big thing is customer expectations, customer journey. We've all had a good and bad app experience. I had a terrible app experience with an airline this morning. I'm not going to name their name, but it was awful. I quit the registration process. So identity powers both security and experience. We all know about the security aspect here. I'm assuming authorization, authentication, fraud protection is a big use case now in identity. But then think about the experience aspect. Omni-channel, how you communicate with your brand across different devices, across different applications within their ecosystem. Personalization, that's more important than ever. Your identity depends on that. So those are the vision. That's what enterprises want to get to, but here's why they can't realize that. The number of identity use cases is growing. If you go to the exhibit hall, there's a number of niche identity vendors there that are great at what they do, but bringing that all together is tough. That leads into integration. The average enterprise has 976 applications, but only 28% of those are integrated. That means those applications aren't realizing the amount of value that they need to. And 38% of respondents in a global survey say that that's the biggest hurdle, the biggest blocker to digital transformation. And why is that? Because our identity tools, our identity systems weren't built for that reality. These are legacy systems. They were meant for specific use cases. They didn't have user experience testing capabilities. And a lot of them are hard-coded. That means you need an army of developers. Only Amazon, Google, Facebook, Microsoft have those armies of developers. So if you can't test user experience, then you can't iterate. You're going to have this back and forth between the business. It's going to take months to get even the smallest change request done, and that's going to slow your go-to-market. Loren, do you want to walk us through an example?
Love to. That's better. All righty. So let me walk you through some examples, and I think many of you can probably relate to what's happening here. As we go through this, there is the vision, and I think all of us have had the business come to us and say, you know what, I want the perfect user experience. I want you to imitate Amazon. How many have been delighted through COVID, I guess everyone bringing their digital experiences out there, how many have been slightly delighted by Amazon's experience? To register, to do banking online transaction, it's decent. I mean, it really is. How many have bought food through like DoorDash or some of those? Pretty good experience. Uber, pretty good experience. I mean, we go through some of those examples in our life and we're saying, okay, who wouldn't want that for my corporation as well? And so you look at this business vision, it's really, how do you streamline that onboarding process? How do you take from unknown to known user, and then how do you protect the resource that you need, and how do you do it in a simple way? And so in this example, the vision here is to say, let me first start to engage that unknown user, and I do that through fraud engines, through fraud services. Next is I want to check not against one fraud service, but I want to check against many. And so you've got a few that you need to connect with. And as Zain said, there's 100 different vendors out there that are all doing something, and we hear the message around, okay, that fits my niche. That, the way they approach that is good for financial services, or the way they approach that, that's really good for a retail event. Next, once you've determined, okay, so I know this isn't a bot, I know this is a human, then we start that registration process. Well, those registration processes are interesting because quite often we want to gather a bunch of information so we can create this personalized experience. And so a lot of people will put big registration forms in front, and they make it too complex, and what happens? Drop off. I mean, we've all experienced, I'm sure the business is saying, darn it, this is like the worst experience ever. And so what they come to us and say, well, what I'd like to do is test. How many have had that request to say, I want to test different flows of registration? See some heads nod. I mean, I think we've all experienced it. And having that ability then to be able to do a A/B test on a different flow and a registration to be able to know what level of information I can capture, as well as how much friction I think is important. Next, as part of that vision, is I want flexibility in the way I authenticate. I want passwordless, or maybe I have what I call the 40 different types of user problem. We work with an airline, and they're always telling us, yeah, we have about 40 different types of users. Some are connected, some are disconnected, some are in planes, some are on tarmac, some are in a kiosk, and so they've got this whole problem. And how do you deal with the different authentication methods, as well as how do you deal with risk? I mean, you may find that someone's on an unprotected device, or it's been jailbroken, or else they're in a context, a network that doesn't make sense. And so that authentication flow matters. And so being able to make a decision to require stronger forms of MFA, ingest risk, be able to then either bypass because the risk is low, or determine that it's high, we can bring that forward. And the last thing, getting back to that registration flow, a lot of people are wanting to provide that personalized experience. They want to make sure that there's self-service tools, that they're interacting and engaging with the customer, and they want to do that through progressive profiling. So this is the vision. How many say your IT staff wants to achieve this vision? Anyone brave? How many's achieved it? You're already there. Get some hand waving. How many say not even close? It depends. All right, so let's talk through this in what the reality is. And I think you guys resonate with this. The reality is that it's really hard to make a lot of different products work. And so quite often we choose this, what I call lesser of two evils. You go to good enough models because it's one vendor has already sort of built out an orchestrated flow, and they've canonized that flow in the user experience. And so imagine you go to like a Microsoft, you are brought into their experience, and it's all wrapped up into the products, but what does that do? It locks you in. It locks you into what they provide, not the rest, and then if you want to introduce another vendor, it becomes very difficult. And so you get into that fraud check, that's just an example of it's a lot of customization, a lot of work to bring them in. Next, registration, quite often because it's too expensive to do A/B testing, we usually put it out there, and then we pull it down or we modify it, and so it's always this keep, try versus test a few options. The authentication flows generally are difficult. Quite often if you buy into a single vendor solution, you're sort of locked in. You can only offer one. So if you were that example of the 40 different user types, you're left with one option for them to try. And so we usually go back to the lowest common denominator and you do emails. It seems like you got password, you got emails, and maybe a bit of SMS. And the last tip, profiling is really difficult because if you want to create a really delightful user experience, progressive profiling is the way to do it. Quite often, a lot of systems don't have very active or good profiling capabilities, and so you're left with grabbing the form, trying to do as much as you can. How many resonate with this? This is reality? It's kind of reality for many of us. All right, so if we look at the existing tools and how they deliver against the business goals, and then we look at what the vision would be, what we're really trying to do is say, let's abstract the experience. Let's take the experience out of the process, and imagine if all the services that you wanted to consume were just APIs. They were just available for you to consume. You could start with that first step of just, I want to know who they are, and so I'm going to put some fraud engine in there, and I'm going to start going from that unknown to known, know them a little bit better. I can start to then bring registration, authentication, and profile in, and I can do that across many vendors because, again, I've abstracted that user experience. And that's a lot of what you're going to see in the rest of the presentation today. So what's the impact if we solve that problem? This is kind of that business element of it. What's the impact? Anyone want to yell out? I like interactive crowds, so anyone want to yell it out? Well, let's look at a few. So first off is you get a better customer experience. How many would agree? If I can orchestrate a single flow, Jotin, definitely, yes, thank you. If you can experience a flow that you've orchestrated, you can provide A/B testing, you can actually introduce people and consume services as you go, and it's one experience. It's not something that's canonized into a product. You get better experience. You look at some of the statistics here, and it resonates well. It's just like if 80% of the customers complain or leave, that's bad. That's bad for business. It's really kind of the wrong direction. Conversion, we all are looking to how do we convert customers, how do we better engage them, and how do we improve satisfaction? And that happens by that frictionless flow. It happens by the fact that we are progressively profiling. It's the fact that we can test different paths, and we can even create and orchestrate an experience unique to that user type. So imagine, go back to that 40 user problem I talked about. If you're on the tarmac, you have some gloves, you have a kiosk that you're trying to do, what is that experience? They want a very different experience than that pilot who has to be disconnected on his phone in a plane. And so those are good examples of how if you can improve that experience, abstract again the experience from the services, these are things that you can achieve. Next is you can lower the security posture, the security risk. How many believe this? I think anyone in security has always said, yeah, if you can make security in the dark and always monitoring, always checking, and always gathering information, it really is, I'm establishing trust with the device and the person and then protecting the resources I need. That will increase things over time. And so imagine if I could then provide a more frictionless process. What can I do? I can actually enhance the quality of that service. I can actually use something different than passwords or use something different than SMS or email because, again, I've augmented that journey for the type of user and the type of device and the service they need. And then the belief is that help desk costs go down because one of the things we've learned over time is that help desks generally are expensive because of friction. We introduce friction in password resets or account recovery or creating new accounts or registration or the experience that Zain had this morning around the registration flow. That's usually what requires a help desk call. And the new statistics, it's about $40 to $50 per incident that a help desk gets a call. And so it's an expensive process when someone has to call that help desk. And then last is improved agility. And I think this is really important. And I had a slide that I was going to include and I didn't, but it was trying to illustrate what it's like to have to bring multiple products together. So how many of, like this tastes 6, how many have 6 unique products that you're trying to orchestrate into one of these flows? Anyone? How many up to 10? 20? I got you. Okay, good. I was worried about you a little bit if you're trying to bring that many in. But you find that that need to bring different products in creates a better experience from a capability standpoint, but again, the orchestration of that is difficult. So if you bring in orchestration, you actually improve agility. You can make that consumption of best-of-breed services easier and better. So you can make the choice of, I'm going to take 15 different services because I need them, but I'm going to ensure that it seems seamless and acts like one product. And that's really what this gets to. All right, so how can orchestration solve problems? I think I've talked about many. And what is orchestration? Anyone want to take a tact, or you can read and then just get through it. But anyone want to tell me what is orchestration? It's low-code adaptive integration framework. Really? How about you, Matt? Want to give a go? Yes? I'm totally calling you out.
Yeah, it's bringing together the tools that you want in your authentication policies and incorporating those into a strong authentication but an easy experience for the user.
Yeah, no, that's well said. I mean, if you imagine there's a lot of vendors out there like Workato, Zapier, Boomi, they're all out there and they're integration platforms as a service. They were originally workflow guys or they were EBS guys or they're doing something to sort of connect everything together. And then they started to create flows. And those flows then had policies or function in between the different modules that are essentially interfacing with the different services to create these experiences. So if you look at Workato, I quite often get asked, how do you differ from a Workato, or you sound a little bit like a security orchestration automation response or a SOAR platform. And I keep saying, they're doing different things, because you look at what SOAR does, they're trying to manage events and trigger events or trigger activity. You look at what a Workato does. They're all about back office automation. They're trying to take a lot of steps out of the flow and just automate those things. And if you look at what identity orchestration, what makes it unique is it's about creating user experiences. It's about taking all these services and essentially targeting the experience you want the end user to have. So if the goal really is then is I want to create these experiences, I want to have a best flow, best process, best experience for the user versus a one-size-fits-all, you start to achieve some of these things. You get to have better experience, the journey is better, you get to have more conversions because your engagement is better and the experience is better. You get through the ability for you to test things very quickly. Imagine if you could actually make a change, simulate it, and move it out into production in an hour. Wouldn't your business be happy with that kind of response? And then last is just, you can really make identity easier. And I think that's our goal. Everyone in this room is here at this conference today trying to figure out how can I be more secure and make this experience better. So how does orchestration do it then? The first is that I need a way to integrate. And that integration is done by normalizing that interface to the APIs of that service. So I build a connector. And quite often we use this Lego analogy where I'm building a Lego block. And that Lego block has some form, and it's a way to essentially standardize an interface to some third party. So an example would be if I'm connecting to an identity verification process, they expose an API, I build a connector on top of it that allows me to normalize how I can bring that into my flow. So the example you see here then is out of a collector library. I take it and I start to build flows, and so I pull connectors out of the flow, put it on my studio, and I lay them out. That tells me those are the services I need, and then I start to create relationships in between. We'll have a demo. It's definitely just slideware, not slideware, it is an actual demo, it's a recording. But you'll see how quickly you can make some of those relationships and the kind of things you do between the relationships. Next is, orchestration now has changed the game. You can talk about what it used to take. I remember my first conversation with a large company who was deploying Salesforce. Any guess how long their project was? This is just to essentially do SSO and provisioning to Salesforce. And they did have 6 instances, so it was a little more complex. But how long did it take them?
6 months.
I don't know how you knew that, but 6 months, it did. And they failed on 3 of them because they had this multiple IDP problem. And so we were talking with them about how can you manage multiple IDPs to get to Salesforce. That was the thing they were challenged, but it was still a really difficult project, very long. Well, those timelines have changed. Connecting to Salesforce now can happen in a matter of hours or minutes if you do it right. Consider doing that for any flow. I can actually start to adapt and I can start to model after what the business sees in a very quick way. And then something that's unique about the way that Ping's orchestration layer works is that we've encapsulated a lot of that experience in our platform. We don't require you to just use us for integration and then have the forms and the interfaces and everything else sit out in other systems. It really is a full self-contained customer experience, even to the point that you can actually demo. You can go in and simulate that experience, make sure it works before you deploy to production. So when you look at then that notion of managing end-to-end experiences, there's a lot of steps in the way. And if you've seen Andre's presentations, if you've seen anything from Ping, we often talk about this journey. This is the modern security journey. It starts from unknown to known. And once we know you, then we authenticate you against the credentials, and then we authorize you to access. The thing about Ping, though, is we've always been a best-of-breed player. We aren't there to try to say we're going to cover all gamuts because competing with Microsoft is never successful, but we can certainly do very well in our niche. And I think many customers who are customers of Ping have recognized that as we do very well in the capabilities we provide. Well, what DaVinci does is it democratizes all those services. So if you look at, I want best-of-breed service from one, but I'm going to orchestrate that experience across all these different platforms. It doesn't matter if this is a Ping service or a third-party service. You really are taking best-of-breed. You're taking the best of those and creating the solution we have. And DaVinci is what we call our orchestration platform. Just raise of hands, how many have heard of DaVinci? How many have not? Any sales guys? No, I'm just joking. I wasn't going to do that to you. And then a few other points then is you consider that I have third-party services, you have your own custom services that expose via API that can build a connector to, or you can use Ping. What we found is that you've changed the way you engage with your business. Usually there's business partners in IT that talk with the different business organizations. You go through all of the requirements gathering. Business analysts spend hours and hours and hours gathering and listening to try to come up with those requirements. to put in a document to then share with IT, and it takes months to get through that process. Now I know we've added agile methodologies to make that easier as we iterate through, but imagine if you had a tool and you had a flow. Is that 5? Okay, cool. Imagine if you had a flow, and that was really what you started with, was you sat down with the business analyst from your business unit, and you said, let's whiteboard. Let's sit down and actually whiteboard what we want to happen, and it really is then whiteboarding that flow. And so next thing we have here is kind of a quick demo. We don't have enough time to get through all of it. We'd love to engage with you and actually show it to you live. Remy's right over there. She is our demo creator, and she does a wonderful job. And now you're going to get flooded with people now. Sorry about that. But Remy's great. Raise your hand. And what this demo is really taking that last experience that we whiteboarded. I'm going to walk you through a little bit, but just to orient you, this is that studio. The things you can't see on there would be, some simulations, some reporting, some of the dashboarding and stuff, but there's also a connector library, and so we have over 100 plus connectors that are there today. We have flows. They can be pre-developed flows that we have or that you can develop and start to create the templates and patterns, and then this just becomes this blank slate, so consider that your whiteboard. Oh, that did not work. That worked fabulous. There we go. So I'm going to just walk through until I get cut off because we wanted to leave a few minutes for questions, yes? And it has to play, and it didn't play. Try that. Okay, I'll stop clicking. Maybe that's the problem. That is one problem. There's all the other problems. So what you're going to see here, though, is this is a blank slate. So imagine if you already had a predefined flow. It was a template that you could work from. This would be a lot easier. But the timer's here, and you're going to find in 10 minutes, we were able to sit down and just start to orchestrate. Now, this was one of our solution architects out of Europe, Federico, and he's kind of one of those awesome guys that knows identity, knows how to make this work. So for him, he's going through it very quickly. We did speed it up a little bit. What you're seeing is there's the form. So I talked about the fact that a form exists in our system. You don't have to create your own. And you just pop the form up. You create a relationship between I need to go look up a user. And so now I've orchestrated how to look up a user. Then I'm going to go in and create a password. I'm going to go authenticate with password. Then the next one is I'm going to see if it's pwned. Is that how you say that? It sounds weird. It's like pwned. But then we're going to see if it's pwned. And then based on if it's pwned or not, we're going to make a decision. So you can actually say I'm going to make this pretty seamless based on a password-based flow, how I can determine if it's pwned or not. If it's not pwned, then we're going to let them through and have a pretty seamless experience. If they are, we're going to make a decision.
Hey, Loren. So this is no code right here, but is it really the whole platform no code, low code?
Yeah,
how do you answer that?
It's interesting. We didn't even stage that, but that was funny that the part that popped up that had a screen that you can edit some of the script. So in most cases, if you created a flow and it's templatized, then there is no code. There's no code whatsoever. But you can find in some of those functions, you can't necessarily canonize it in a connector, or you want to do and manipulate the reaction a little more. And so that's where the low code part comes in. It's an editor in the system. You don't have to jump out to somebody else. You don't have to go in and try to edit files. It's all just within system. But you actually saw them going in and modifying that function. That's the low code part. If anyone ever tells you that it's no code, they're either super, super mature and have handled every edge case, which we know is not true, or you just have to understand that they're templatizing a lot more. And what this does is let you templatize to do full no code, or it gives you a chance to edit and manage scripts if you need to.
And then if, say a customer comes to us and we don't have an app in our connector library, how easy is it for them to build one, to add it to the library?
Yeah, that's a great question. So today, Ping will work with the vendor of choice and will rapidly create a connector and put it in our connection library. We are also working with many of our technology partners to have them build their own, and we certify them to bring them into our library. And then we hope by the end of this year, just to say hope from a roadmap standpoint, but is where then you could have customer-built flows. But if there isn't a connector, we have a special connector that will actually make API REST calls. And that's where a lot of the cases where you want to first test it out and try it. it's a great way to start because then you know what APIs I need, you know what flow, and then we can canonize it in a connector. And then this is an example. What you saw here is that we had one flow where if we reached out to a risk engine and we found that it was a low risk, then we created a process and said, you are a low risk, easy process. The other scenario there is just to say you did an address change that triggered something, and it said that, okay, this is a medium risk, so we're going to change the flow and the behavior and require, I think this, if I remember the call, it required an SMS or an OTP to get in. All right? How we at? You stood up, which means 1 minute.
We're
Are you
at
yanking
time.
me?
Any
We're at time.
questions from the audience?
What is the output of this planning doc? Is it an XML document, some sort of document that we can deploy to the runtime? Or the whole runtime is also part of the...
The whole runtime is part of this system, yeah. And I may not fully understand your question, because you're wanting to export and then provision to something else. This is all within system, so.
I cannot take a document, XML or JSON document, and deploy it to my JVM.
No, yes, I'm looking at Remy just to say, did you hear that one? I don't know the answer is the thing.
The output is obviously you've created this beautiful workflow, and the idea is that you can either, there's many different ways that we can tie it into an application so that you can invoke this workflow, and there's different ways that we can do that. We have API integrations, SDK integrations, and we have like OIDC, SAML integrations that allow you to do the workflow. So
Did that answer your question? Yes.
I think we have one
Thank
more
you.
question.
One more.
How is this Devonship platform different from a normal orchestrating platform like MuleSoft and TIBCOs and etc.?
Yeah, so the question was, how does it differ from, just what we call the normal workflow engines, and, example was TIBCO, or it was what you would get with MuleSoft. A lot of those can do what's here. Ours is very identity-centric, as well as if you look at like TIBCO, it was an event bus that then figured out how to provide a way to build flows on events, but it doesn't have those interfaces. It doesn't have some of the function keys, and it's not specialized for identity. And more so, I think if you consider, I'm building an experience, and I would recommend all of you try it, because the fact that you can create an experience that can be consumed immediately versus TIBCO would take you quite a bit of work. MuleSoft, I know, has some plugins, some widgets to make it a little easier, but again, you're trying to take a generalized integration platform and make it an experience builder versus use it for more of an event bus type of thing. And we're seeing that same with Zapier and Mercado. They're really great integration platform as a services vendors, and working with them, meaning they can handle some of the back office functions, we'll provide that user experience on top, has been good. And imagine those SOAR platforms where they're spitting a security event that I can consume and bring into this flow to manage the experience, is where we see that we meet in the middle. And I have a slide that shows sort of a Venn diagram of how that kind of plays out. There is some overlap for sure, but I think they play together well. Hey.
Yeah, if you're interested in doing something better for SAML and all integrations, I've been looking at Link Central. So then I'm wondering, how does that tool sit and compare with?
It's so interesting question timing-wise, and I'm way over time, so I'm going to answer this one, and then I'm out. Fair? Okay. So the question was just, you've got Ping Central, and we're building out a self-service platform for enabling app owners, developers to get OAuth tokens, or essentially templatize how you configure SAML. And when Ping Central, it was for that purpose of trying to move IT out of the day-to-day integration and offer self-service for app owners to consume. And I was on a call with a company that starts with an N and has a Y and an L in it. And they're using DaVinci to create one of those flows. And so they actually have said, we're going to move away from Ping Central from orchestrating that experience for developers and only use it to do environment orchestration, that it does that as well. And they are going to start using DaVinci to create that portal experience. And I'm just going to tease, but they said that the experience is great and how easy it is to create, that it's better than some other vendor out there that's doing some similar things. So I won't mention who that was, but somebody else. But yeah, I would consider DaVinci, and one thing, just the way that we built the connector flows for our partners, we actually use DaVinci in a self-service portal kind of a way. All right, I'm done. I think I'm definitely over time, but thank you. Appreciate it.